Comics are gonna break your heart. Let's cut to the chase. Everyone knows who Alan Moore is. Even if you don't know him by name, you definitely know something that he's created. He made this, and this. Many consider Moore and Gibbons' Watchmen one of the greatest comics of all time, but if you ask Moore himself about how he feels about the book, you won't get a happy answer. Moore's relationship with Watchmen is rocky at best, and a large part of that has to do with DC's role in things. You see, DC currently owns Watchmen, and they've done things that left Moore just a little bit angry. Let's get one thing straight. This isn't a critical analysis of Watchmen as a comic book. Far better critics have already published hundreds of pieces about it, and frankly, I just got too much of the dumb brain, you know? So without further ado, here's... 1983 was a big year. Aside from a bunch of things that probably don't matter, it was the year that DC purchased Charlton Comics. It was also the year that Alan Moore made his big debut at DC Comics. Moore, coming straight off the heels of revitalizing Marvel Man, now known as Miracle Man for the layman, was hired by editor Len Wein to revitalize Swamp Thing. Moore, hailing from ye olde Britland, quickly became popular in the American comics industry. Moore was looking for his next big project, this time a team of heroes he could play around with outside of continuity. Moore's initial target was the Archie superhero team, the Mighty Crusaders, but his sights quickly moved on to the Charlton superheroes after they got bought. Teaming up with his former 2080 collaborator Dave Gibbons, Moore proposed his idea to editor Dick Giordano, who rejected the idea. See, DC already had plans for the characters that would conflict with Moore's proposal, but also, Giordano knew that Moore could make more money with original characters. Writers and artists received 2% of cover sales back in the day, but as creators, they'd get an extra 1% of sales. Yeah, little known secret, the comics industry isn't exactly the most profitable industry out there. Giordano liked the idea though, and pushed Moore to pursue it with new characters. So Moore and Gibbons created their own pastiches of the Charlton characters, and soon they had their next big project, Watchmen. Watchmen debuted in 1986, written by Moore, drawn by Gibbons, and colored by John Higgins, and it ran for roughly a year. In a 1986 interview with little-known indie creator Neil Gaiman, Moore and Gibbons pulled back the curtains on the creative process behind the book, including who actually owned Watchmen. The original deal found the rights to Watchmen going back to Moore and Gibbons 1 year after DC ran out of ways to make a profit from the book. Gibbons mentioned how horrendous, yet legal, it would be for DC to have Rorschach and Batman crossover, or to do a sequel to the book. It's worth noting that Moore seemed pretty enthusiastic in this interview in regards to Watchmen getting adapted into a potential movie, though he was still adamant about Watchmen being a comic first and foremost. Moore had actually optioned out film rights to a lot of his comics back in the day, later stating that he only did so under the assumption that the movies weren't going to be made, netting him that good old rope money. So as long as DC couldn't make any money off the book, including reprint sales for a year, Moore and Gibbons would get the rights to the characters back. There was only one issue.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Watchmen ended up being a huge deal. Aside from contributing to a darker, more serious turn in the industry, DC was making guap from the sales of the collected trade of the book, which came out in 1987. Collected editions weren't common at all back then, but with books like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Rises blowing up, DC quickly found new cash flow in reprinting the 12-issue series as one book. And long story short, it hasn't gone out of print like ever. The TPBs weren't the only issue that Moore and Gibbons encountered, as DC also managed to swindle merch sales from them. DC told Moore and Gibbons that since it was considered promotional material, they didn't need to pay the creators any royalties. Moore quickly realized that he wasn't going to be getting Watchmen back anytime soon, but still continued to work for DC, writing a bunch of other stories, including The Killing Joke with artist Brian Bolland in 1988, and creating his elusive Twilight of the Superheroes proposal, which is definitely a topic for another video. Around this same time, a bunch of creators, including the guys who made the TMNT, had been working on a Creators' Bill of Rights to give creators their proper share of credits, profit, and ownership. Just the kind of thing that Moore needed. As for the results, it went,
Straight away, good for Kobe Bryant.
Moore finally had his Diary of a Wimpy Brit the last straw moment when DC proposed an age rating system for their comics, and after finishing up V for Vendetta, Moore left DC for good in 1989. Moore went straight into writing a variety of indie comics, including the highly esteemed From Hell with artist Eddie Campbell and Lost Girls with his now wife Belinda Gebbe, which featured girls from various children's novels. But Moore wasn't done with the mainstream industry just yet, as he had found a new outlet for his work at Image Comics, the hip new indie publisher run by a bunch of big-name creators that had recently left Marvel. After a brief stint on Spawn and Wildcats and parodying Silver Age Marvel with his miniseries 1963, Moore worked for, not with, for, as in under Rob Liefeld. Yes, that Rob Liefeld. Alan Moore, creator of V for Vendetta, was hired to work for Rob Liefeld, creator of P for Piss. He spent a few years pulling a Miracle Man and revamping Liefeld's Superman XB Supreme, but after realizing how much of a pain Liefeld was to work with, Moore decided it was time to move on to the next big thing. And the next big thing came courtesy of Jim Lee and Scott Dunbier, who offered Moore the chance to create his own imprint under the ownership of Wildstorm. Moore's imprint, America's Best Comics, or ABC, quickly began gathering artists and writers to prep for the new line of comics, including the likes of Kevin O'Neill, Chris Sprouse, and J.H. Williams III. I know what you're thinking. But wait, what does this all have to do with Moore and DC? Well, strap in, because I'm about to tell you how. As ABC was getting ready for its early 1999 launch, Jim Lee sold Wildstorm off to, well, guess who? Yeah, that's right, DC. So there Moore was, months away from launching an entire line of comics, only to find out that it would be under DC. Lee and Dunbier actually flew all the way over to Moore's Hobbit Cave in Ingerland to ensure him that he wouldn't get screwed over. Moore also realized that he was too far in and there were too many moving parts to just drop the project, so he went along with the decision. So ABC came out to thunderous applause in 1999 with books like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or LXG, Promethea, and Tom Strong. But just like Death, Taxes, and DC rebooting their comics every 5 years, adaptations were inevitable. With Moore flinging out movie rights left and right hoping for that old rope money, Fox took the bait and made 2 movie adaptations, From Hell and LXG. And both movies were, 2 packs of ass! Moore was undoubtedly pissed because, well, neither adaptation did the original justice, but he made bank so he could easily write it off. Except, Fox got sued for LXG by 2 writers claiming that Fox had stolen the idea from them, and worse yet, that Fox was in cahoots with Moore to write the book for the sake of the movie. While Fox ended up eventually settling out of court, Moore was left burned, vowing never to associate with any adaptation of his works ever again. So, Watchmen. It had hop-skipped many hands over the years looking for a film adaptation, including the likes of Terry Gilliam and David Hayter. You know, the voice of Solid Snake. Hayter's script was actually the most warmly received by Moore himself, with him saying, "David Hayter's screenplay was as close as I could imagine anyone getting to Watchmen. That said, I shan't be going to see it. My book is a comic book, not a movie, not a novel, a comic book." I'm sorry, England. But as we all know, all that hop-skipping led to it landing in Zack Snyder's hands, and well, honestly, there isn't really much to talk about there. Moore secured his bag in exchange for his name being taken out of the credits for the movie. So let's get back to comics, because if you thought that DC was done f***ing around with Moore, you're sorely mistaken. You gotta have a severe case of dumb brain to think that DC left Moore alone. The 5th issue of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen had a fake vintage ad in it for a Marvel douche. DC quickly destroyed the first print run of that issue and had it fixed to avoid any issues with Marvel, the not douche company. This wasn't the last of editorial interferences from DC, and Moore finally said f*** it and decided to leave Wildstorm, taking the one ABC property he owned, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, with him. Moore managed to get League back thanks to the fact that it was written under a previous deal that gave Moore and Kevin O'Neill full ownership of the title. So off Moore went and nothing bad ever happened again. Just kidding. Come on, you gotta have some real dumb brain to think that it ends there. See, for roughly a decade and a half, Watchmen remained a standalone piece. Even with the film adaptation, there were no sequels or prequels or spin-offs of the comic. So what better thing to do than to make not just 1, but 8 prequels to Watchmen? The project, titled Before Watchmen, consisted of 8 miniseries from creators such as the late Darwin Cook, Adam Hughes, Brian Azzarello, and J. Michael Straczynski, each following various characters from the Watchmen lore. Moore was
Fucking finished!
Not only because DC went through with the project, but also because then publishers Jim Lee and Dan DiDio actually offered Moore back the rights to Watchmen in exchange for him writing the prequels and sequels for them. This was Diary of a Wimpy Brit, the last straw, third strike for Moore, who finally cut himself off entirely from the comics industry. In an interview with Sarah Ephemera in 2011, Moore went off about his feelings towards the project and DC as a whole, even going as far as to say that he wouldn't even consider the creators of the books to be legitimate creators, but rather industry employees. Regardless, Before Watchmen came out to mixed results, and that's really it. After that, Moore cut himself off completely from the industry, but continued to put out comics, finishing LXG and retiring in 2019. DC saw Moore giving up the rights to Watchmen as open season. On one hand, we saw Tom Strong and Prometheus showing up in the Terrifics and Justice League of America respectively, and on the Watchmen side of things, we had an upcoming Watchmen maxi series Manhattan writer Tom King and DC's Batman series, and fucking Wally West with Dr. Manhattan powers. What? It's safe to say that whatever sacrosanctity that Watchmen once had doesn't exist anymore. But does it matter? There's a certain irony in Moore's various successes riding on the coattails of previous works, be it him reworking Charlton characters or him using characters from popular literature in both League and Lost Girls. Moore himself has argued that there's a difference though, stating that he was outright stealing the characters from dead creators for his own works rather than adapting the original stories, which is what he considers Before Watchmen to be. Not sure how that holds up in court, but sustained overruled. It's easy to write Moore off as an angry curmudgeon, but his story is also a cautionary tale, one of many when it comes to creators' rights in the comics industry. What was originally supposed to be a creator-owned work has now become a corporate cash cow for DC. From DC pushing the original creators of Superman into poverty, to leaving Batman co-creator Bill Finger out of the credits on all Batman works until 2015, the industry is one built on a history of shady practices, and you can't fault Moore for becoming disenchanted with it. Thanks for watching. I know it's been a long time since my last video, but hopefully now that I'm stuck at home with nothing to do, I can push more of these out. If you've got any suggestions for things that I should cover next, I'm open to a variety of things, honestly. So if you want to just comment that below, I'd be happy. If you like this video, please drop a like below and subscribe if you want more. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter should be on the screen. Other than that, I think that's all for now. And I'll see you guys in the next video.